People at the top collaborate, they don't compete. If you notice yourself in competition mode all the time with everybody, it's because you're not at the top yet. That's an interesting thing. If you're like, I compete with everybody, okay, well, you won't when you're at the top. What you'll start doing is collaborating and sharing and helping other people to win, because there's enough success for all of us. Welcome, everyone. So glad you're here. It is Wednesday, October 16th, and you're with the community. So excited about today's training in particular, because as many of you know, we've been doing an 8-part series. We started last week with listings. Talk about an incredible session. Holy moly, we learned a ton from some top listing agents who are taking 70, 80, 90, 100 plus listings a year. That was absolutely outrageous. And if you didn't see it, go back into your account, watch that one. That was huge. And so today we're going to dig in and we're going to the buyer side of the transaction, which, as we all know, has changed a little bit recently. So I'm excited to talk about this. And we have one of our own superstar leaders, Tyler Boening, here with some special guests. I'm going to let Tyler introduce those guests in a moment, talk a little bit more about what that is. And thank you, everyone, for being here, including our amazing guests.
Hey, I am doing fantastic. And I'm excited about today because buyers are my personal preference and when it comes to anything real estate related. And I pulled this panel of humans together, and who I'm actually really excited to introduce. Some people I've got some like really good standing relationships with. Jordan, please.
Hello. So excited to be here. I am in Salem, Oregon. My husband and I have a team of 11 agents, but we are in production ourselves. So excited to be here.
Yeah, and a funny thing with Jordan is like I added her as a Facebook friend ages ago because she was just like, I saw some content. I was like, oh, that's great. And like, oh, she looks cool. Oh, she's EXP, and kind of did the thing. And then recently I went to the Build event in Salem and I saw her and I was like, oh, hey, I know that lady. And then like 20 minutes later, I was like, oh, son of a, like she's going up on stage and talking to everybody. Or like, holy crap, like what did I miss? Man,
I know it just happened. Yeah. I didn't know what was going on, but I'm like, sure, I'll talk.
Yeah, I was like, oh wow, like she's part of like all kinds of stuff right now. Like that's awesome. And then I've got a good friend of mine, Joshua Grossman, on the call as well.
Hi everybody, I'm Josh Grossman. I'm in Bend, Oregon. I don't necessarily know that I would consider myself a superstar, but I am a team of 2, just me and a partner. And this year we're on track to do 20 million. So with 40 transactions. So I'm feeling pretty good about that and glad to share what I've learned.
Awesome. And then last but not least, Miss Natasha.
Hey there, Natasha Silly. I'm from Portland, licensed in Oregon and Washington. Just a solo agent here, but excited to be on.
So it doesn't look very Portlandy behind you, but it's a beautiful lake.
Oh, it's Mirror Lake. So close, Mount Hood.
And so as far as that piece goes a little bit, Jeff, if you want to kick on the slide after like, names, I wanted to start this process kind of touching base on, there's a lot of people who are struggling right now with all the changes and like all these things, and we're having to have a lot deeper conversations. And, in a lot of ways we kind of consider, at least like for me, I'm like the NAR, all they did is add 17 pages more to every documentation file that we have to fill out, which is stupid. But we are set in what we're like with. And so I wanted to kind of start with what truly works for you to find the best buyers. Like what do you really lean on and lean into? Because I almost hate the word prospecting, but like where do you find those real estate related conversations that actually end up in conversion of buyers? I kind of want to hear from Josh first, actually, because his price point and like even Natasha, we're talking about like a different set of numbers. So if you two wanted to kind of speak on that a little bit first, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I mean, like I hate to say that my sphere of influence is what brings me on in business, because I remember 20 years ago when I first started this, I was like, oh, it's sphere. I'm like, what are you talking about? But it's true, right? Like I have a lot of referrals that come back to me from people I've helped over the past, as well as other agents I've done deals with. I do have a lead generation, so I do pay for leads. I don't pay Zillow for leads, and I never will because they're our competition. But I do have a lead generation service, but it's more wrapped around like they do the ads and everything for me on my website, and we do the follow-up. I'm going to tell you right now that the follow-up is where the money's at. Like, you have to follow up with people, and you have to do it consistently, and you're looking for one of two outcomes. Yes, we want to work with you, or no, don't ever talk to me again. I mean, it's that is the truest case of what we do. And you have to create and have quality conversations with people and let them know that you're here to help, right? Too many people are starving, and like, I need a paycheck, I don't. I love selling houses. I make good money at it, but never, if I don't get a customer, I'm not going to starve because of it. Now, I know everyone's not in that situation, but you can't let that come across. Don't be commission hungry. Don't smell like you just need a check, right? You need to be there to help people. I had a lady that I worked with for over 2 years. We actually went through an entire transaction. At the very end of it, it fell apart because her financial situation, she wasn't 100% upfront with what was going on. But a year later, she called me. She's like, "Hey, I need to sell my house in Brasada, and it's worth $2 million." And I went and I sold her house in 2 days. And now after I did that, she fired her other agent that she had, and now she's hired me again to sell her other $2 million house, right? So it's about a relationship that you build over time, and no customer is too small, no customer is too big. And I wouldn't, like, if someone calls you and says, "Hey, I want to buy a trailer in a park," sell them a trailer in a park, because the next deal for them is going to be their house or their friends or whatever it happens to be. So, I sell $1 million houses. I will sell a $90,000 mobile home too, because it's all about people for me. And that's the way I've built the entire business. So if anyone's new or anyone's struggling, I would say get a lead generation source that you consistently follow up on, and you have to make contacts, right? Contacts every single day. If you're not talking to somebody every single day about what you do, then you're not going to win in this. You're just not going to win, right? So I've been doing this since 2003. So this is 21 years for me. And I'm still here doing it. So
It's so funny. You only look like 27 years old.
I wish, man. 51 a couple days ago, actually. So
well, happy birthday.
Thank you.
And Natasha, what's your take on the question?
Yeah, I definitely agree. Consistency is key. I hate to say it, but most of mine are referrals as well. But if I was talking to a newer agent, I'd say open houses all the way as a free place to start. Not having to pay for it. You have people coming to you, raising their hands, looking for somebody to help them do the thing they're looking for. So that's the direction if I had to start over in a new town tomorrow. And just maintaining relationships. Most of my customers come from other real estate agents. So even maintaining, relationships within the community, for example, or going to EXPCon or whatever those networking events are, they all kind of feed back into it.
Hey, I'll chime in on open houses real quick. I see a lot of new agents that are doing open houses, and they're just hounding people for their information. That is the absolute wrong way to do it. So if someone comes into your open house, don't say you have to sign in, right? Right there, you're putting up this giant block wall, right, that no one's going to give you at. However, if you let them look around and then give them a feedback form and simply ask them the question, "Hey, my seller would love to hear feedback from what you think about this house." Most people love to give feedback. In fact, I think if you polled 100 people, most of them would love to tell you their opinion on anything that happens to be a thing. So let people give your opinion, and don't be that guy or gal that, like, "Oh, you have to sign in, you have to sign in, you have to sign in." So that's just a little tip.
Yeah, I kind of like the bottleneck strategy. Make yourself kind of big in a doorway. They're not going to shove past you. They're going to sit and talk to you for a second. So it's a little aggressive, I understand. But on the other hand, like, body language without forcing something like a sign in can really make it so that you have that same opportunity to just chat for a little bit, show your personality, and go from there.
I always try to flutter my pretty blue eyes and ask them what their name is, and it never works for some reason. So, Jordan, what is your world of Sphere and like connecting with people and to actually procure like buying clients?
Yes. So lead gen is probably my favorite part of everything that I do. And keep in mind, I'm a team leader too. So half my time is allocated to being a good team leader. But Mike and I did we are 12.5 million year to date. we have a couple million in escrow, so we'll probably finish 16 or 17. So that's kind of us doing part-time hours, 20, 30 hours a week. So love lead gen. I wrote out a whole list of what I do on a weekly basis, just personally, and showing my team how to do it. But I would say my top few things are going to business networking events or planning them personally and inviting the business and entrepreneur local community, because I like being around them. You won't find me at local moms groups because I don't want to talk about diapers. I have 4 kids, but I don't want to. So I'm with other professionals. I'm with people that help me grow my business, and I'm passionate about it. And there I am working with a perfect target audience. So I get a lot of deals there. And then also I love agent relationships. So I reach out, just like lead generation, I reach out to agents all over the country on Instagram, cultivate relationships with them, cheer them on, share their stuff. And then I'm the agent that they'll send their Salem deals to. And then I would say my last thing, I have a million, but the last thing that I like to do is go out and add people onto social media, like literally everywhere I go. If I'm not adding new people in there, from the grocery store to an event I went to like literally, birthday parties for the kids, like whatever, I add them in, and then I'm in front of them consistently. I'm sending them messages. I'm sending them birthday videos. I'm commenting on their stuff. And so I use social media to stay right in front of their face all the time. So those are my top ones.
No, I love that. And I want to chime in a little bit, like in my own world, and a little bit, kind of different pieces of it, what each of you has said is, for any new agent or like any experienced agent, like my history was car sales. I was that guy. But part of like what I really truly appreciate out of that is every single day at clock in to clock out, you had to have 30 conversations. It didn't matter how many phone calls you had to make. It didn't matter like where you went, what you did. 30 freaking conversations were required. And like they didn't give it. I'm gonna try to keep the cursing down, Jeff. They didn't care like whatsoever. Like if it was 100 phone calls, 200 phone calls, and 500, you had to talk to 30 people and at least get like 30 FUs. That's just like the lay of the land for that. But an additional piece, and I'll talk about this a little bit more in my business site later, to the open house stuff, is always setting the next expectation. Because like what Josh was saying, and don't have people don't force the sign in or anything like that. But where I've seen the success, because I'm not a big open house guy, even though you're essentially setting up an office where you can have possible walk-ins, which is awesome and something to distract people. It's essentially almost free aside from time. But what I've found success in is just like any Zillow call or realtor.com lead, and typically those people aren't going to buy the house that they inquire about. So they're likely not going to purchase that home. But if you choose the right house, where there is a desirable school district or proximity to downtown, and the hubbub of activities, and typically that's one of those standing things for why those people are looking in that area. So if you do an open house in those places, I always like to have 20 CMAs with the 5 closest properties that are like the one you're doing at an open house. And then through the marketing center on EXP, there's an open house comparative sheet. And you can get your details all on that and everything else. Because at the end, it's just welcome, take a look around. But at the end of it, prompting that next step, handing a CMA and that comparison sheet and just telling people hey, if you're having the open house extravaganza kind of Saturday, here's this, it's a comparison sheet. You can just take notes on it to help keep things clear. Because I know if I go out and show 4 or 5 different properties to people, it's really easy to intermix details and just get things all intertwined. And so this is just to help you kind of keep things together. But if you are interested in this area, these are the 5 closest houses like within about a quarter mile, and they're actually for sale right now. And I'm wrapping this up today, and probably around 2 o'clock. If you drive past these on your way out, right, and you see one that you want and you'd like to check out, I could probably have my signs in my truck by 3, and I could probably open that door for you by 3:15, and just set it like chances are like they're gonna drive past a couple of those, but then they got your cute little comparison sheet and your CMA with like your phone number just littered all over the damn thing, and because that's at least trying to get yourself like in front of somebody like more so than just the open house experience. And because I know like if I'm alone, like with a couple or anybody else, like I can make somebody fall in love with me and want to work with me. And so yeah,
Hey,
that's
Tyler, one of the things that has occurred to me, and Josh, Jordan, and Natasha, you guys are amazing. Thank you so much for being here and for being so willing to share with others. So for agents who are watching this, it sounds like the earliest step, and today we're talking the anatomy of a transaction, right? And we're on the buyer side. The first thing is you have to find a buyer. There's none of the rest of this matters, right? Like you can know all, I always say you can be an expert at paperwork, and if you have no clients, who freaking cares, right? Like it doesn't matter. And you have to figure out a way to find some business. Jordan's out there on the internet doing, some type of magic that some of us don't know how to do. That's incredible. Natasha and Josh have built a great book of business based on relationships where people keep coming back. And what I've discovered, by the way, I've always been really prospecting based myself, right? I'm a telephone prospector. That's my thing. And Tyler has his own deal, right? Everybody's going to have a niche. Here's what I will tell you guys, for anyone watching, your eventual goal should be to have a book of business that's reciprocal, meaning that people keep coming back and there's internal rotation, meaning people keep coming back to the top. Hey, I've been in my house for 3 to 7 years. I'm ready for the next one. I'm upscaling, I'm downscaling. My husband got a job. My husband died. Like, I don't know, right? Like things happen in life. Everyone's going to die, by the way, in case that was, news to you. But like what's fascinating is there's always a trigger. And what's amazing to me is I ran some math, by the way, here in the chat for Tyler's lead gen model. I like the 30 conversations per day. If you're brand new to real estate, do that. Just have 30 conversations. I don't know, go find them. You'll find them. It's on the phone. It's go to Walmart. Doesn't matter. Just harass people. But, and I did the math really quick, because at 20% conversion rate, meaning people are like, I don't know, maybe I'd buy or sell a house. I don't know, like someday I'd like to. That for me, that's a conversion to an interested party. That's a prospect. That's 30 prospects a week, 48 working weeks. You take 4 weeks off a year, like a JOB. That's 1,400 plus prospects per year. And even if you only close 3% of those, that's 48, or 44. It's almost 4 deals a month. That's just doing the consistent work of lead generation per day. The problem is most people give up on this strategy by day number what? 2, 3? You guys guess, right? Like that's the problem. But once you've built that book of business, and it sounds like all of you guys have, then guess what happens? People start coming back. If and only if what? You keep in touch. And I love that. So, okay, so let's keep moving here, because what I'm interested in is now you've built a book of business, or you continue to build this. You guys are following up. You're keeping in touch with people. What's happening next, Tyler? And I'm guessing your next slide starts to address this in terms of like, where do we go with this? We've got these buyers. How do we control the conversation? How do we control the pathway to success?
I wanted to kind of get your guys' take on like one, obviously the NAR stuff is new and fun. So I wanted to kind of hear like what maybe like verbal scripts you're using with people to kind of get through that. Also, like what your buyer consultation looks like. Because I always say like sometimes it's a buyer consultation, sometimes it's a backyard consultation, sometimes it's a driveway consultation. But like where you assume control of the sale and the process for those next steps to really start kicking forward, looking at houses and like with intent.
We, I made it a pretty hard, fast rule that I take everybody out on a tour of my area. That's not looking at houses. You have to sign a buyer's broker agreement just to show them what Bend, Oregon looks like, right? And so I invite them to a Zoom call first off. Like if we get a lead, we get the conversation, we get them on a Zoom call. I think Zoom is more powerful because now they can see who I am, right? They can see my inflections. They can see how I talk, my mannerisms, all that kind of stuff. Right then you're starting to build rapport, right? And then you say, hey, if you guys are going to be in the town, because we get a lot of relocation buyers, right? A lot of people come here from California, Washington, Texas, never been here before. Maybe they've been here for 1 or 2 times. I've been here for over 20 years. I promise you, I know Bend, Oregon better than they do. And I take them out and I show them the town from my perspective, right? In that transaction, basically of touring around town, you 100% or know if you have a buyer or not, right? If you can get to that point, they go out to sell with you. You can get them to your mortgage broker. You can get them through the rest of the thing. The signing of a buyer broker's agreement, right? I actually, I've been doing this for a long time, and I learned a valuable lesson just on my last deal, right? First time home buyer, and I knew they didn't have a whole lot of money, and I usually sign for 3%. That's just what I do. I don't negotiate it down. I didn't with these people because they were kind of on the edge. They're like, "Oh, we don't know if we can do this," and I was like, "You know what? I know I'm going to get 2.5%." So I just got an email from the listing agent. She's like, "Hey, this negotiator, this seller is a relocation seller, and they're paying 3%. So amend your agreement," right? So this is a tip for everybody: sign at 3%. Like, just sign at 3%. And the conversation is way different than you would expect, right? We signed at 3% on a $1.1 million house. The seller came back where, "Hey, we're only going to give 2.25%. And we were like, "That's great." We went back to our seller and said, "Hey, guess what? You get all of our services for 0.75%. These people were over the moon happy. They're like, "Oh my gosh, that's awesome. That's way cheaper than 6%, right? So use those numbers in your conversations and just like be friends with people. Like, that's what this is all about. Like, if you can create a client, great. If you can create a friend and a neighbor, it's even better, because we all want raving fans of what you do, right? If you're not using Google reviews, stop using Zillow, stop using realtor.com, stop using everything but Google. Google is the best, largest, it's everywhere, man. Does somebody say, "Hey, go realtor.com it"? No, they say, "Hey, go Google it," right? So when somebody's looking for something, Google My Business should be where they're going. And if you should get as many 5-star reviews as you possibly can from friends, family, people that you know, people that just have been doing this, right? Because that is going to lead to a lot of business, right? So I think in a nutshell, be friends with people. Offer to do something that doesn't make you any money, right? I have a fully electric car. I don't care. I'll drive to Medford and back, and it didn't cost me anything, right? But if I were to do that for somebody, I promise you they're going to buy a house from me, because they're going to like, "Wow, this guy really, really went out of his way." So be friends with people, offer to do something for them, and make it about them, right? Like, the tagline of my website is "Real Estate Done Your Way."
Jordan, what would you say is your powerhouse of conversion with the consultation to forward them into those next steps where you actually have someone tangible you would consider a buyer?
Yes. So I will say first, on social, I cast a really wide net to try to get buyer leads from my sphere on there. So you won't see me posting things like, "Are you ready to buy a home?" I never will do that. I'll say, "Hey, are you, 12 to 24 months out from thinking of purchasing a home?" And that feels very low pressure to people, and they feel confident in reaching out because they know, like, "Oh, she's not going to I'm not wasting her time." So I cast a very wide net. I get way more leads in, and yeah, some of them are longer nurtures. But anyways, if they are certain types of leads, I'll funnel them to my new home buyer class, because I can tell that an hour-long coffee appointment will not be worth anyone's time, and it might not go anywhere. But yeah, so when I have my consultation with them, I do almost 100% Zoom or in person if they're in the area. And the first third of that appointment is simply trust, rapport, making them laugh, getting to know them, showing them that I'm a weirdo just like them. And just like, if they don't trust me, then that 3% is going to be really hard to get them to sign. And throughout the process, it's going to be very rocky. And so trust is huge. And then after that, I go over the roadmap just to give them like a high level, snapshot of what the transaction looks like if they are not familiar with it. And then I love the buyer broker agreement. I've had very little issues with it. I actually present it as like the most exciting thing in the world. And just say, "Hey, the seller pays their agent, the buyer pays their agent. Totally makes sense, whatever." But the exciting news for you is you can actually ask the seller to pay some of it. And they're like, oh my gosh. And then they sign it. It's like not a big deal. Yeah, and if they're a long-term nurture, I throw them in KB Core and do a drip campaign. And then if they're like more of a warm lead, then I'm bringing them into like all my events that I do. I'm a big events person. And that like client-focused events. And then if they're a hot lead, I'm talking to them every day. I'm very connected with them. We want to get to showings as soon as possible.
And you mentioned something there that about like the new buyer seminar. How often do you hold those? Like for the lead count that comes in as you funnel down and how like the new buyers pop in, like, is that a once a month thing?
Yeah. Once a month. We actually have better attendance at the in-person ones than Zoom ones, though we've played around with that. So the in-person ones, people just really like that. We have an environment where they can bring their kids and they know they're going to get snacks. And I have my kids there too. Like, it's just very like welcoming. It's not very long and we have great attendance for that. So.
Really? And so I have to do like the devil's advocate thing. Do you think you have attrition or like lose people if I mean, like, what's the process look like? Because you know, I see like a new buyer as like personally in my world, like, ooh, I'm gonna fire up that excitement and get them all kind of jazzed. Obviously, case by case basis, but I feel like there could be a like moment of transition where it's like, oh, fire you up. I'll see you in 3 weeks.
Oh yeah, I would say it's not like that. Like basically, that room is for, you know, kind of those ones where we think they're like a week or just like, you know, might not ever turn into something. But we still target those people because if we become friends with them, they're going to send people to us, and that happens all the time. So we still target people whether we think that they'll use us or not. But anyways, but that room, a lot of times it's those people that are nervous to go to coffee with us. They are worried about pressure or being sold to, and that's just going to be a chunk of home buyers until you can get them in to let them see you face to face and trust you. And so once we get them in and we get to know them in the class, by the time of it, the whole room's friends with each other, and then it's very natural to go into the next like coffee appointment.
So you filter it pretty well then.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
You've got it dialed in, and I'm just
and we like it's fun. Like everything we do, if it's not fun, we don't do it. That's why I have a target audience and I'm trying to get around all the time, and I don't like cold calling, and everything I do is organic. I don't pay for a thing. And so so that's just my vibe, I guess.
All right, I love it. Natasha, how do you feel about the conversion world?
Yeah, I mean, I think you know, I agree with both of them, and doing the networking is wonderful. I think in the beginning when people told me, "Oh, you have to be, you know, trusted and build rapport," I maybe got in my head a little bit about what that takes. And to get past that, I realized that not every client is good for me. And so when I'm sitting down and meeting with people, reminding myself that I'm half of this equation took the pressure off of needing to almost perform. And I became more genuine in those interactions, which I think made for better client relationships. So more of a mindset thing, I suppose, of retaining in that very first interaction rather than actually, you know, doing anything different, just shifting the way you looked at those conversations, their people, your people. And for me anyways, hard selling has always been really challenging. So being able to be my genuine self in those moments was really helpful. Not saying you shouldn't nurture leads that you're not necessarily connecting with right away, or that you shouldn't follow up, because I think that those can turn into more genuine interactions later on, but just kind of to change the way you think about it.
No, I love that, and so like a good theme, right, to like what everyone's saying, you know, is like obviously we all kind of know it's a relationship game and a conversation sport.
Mm-hmm.
Period. Right, but it's touching on something that Josh said is how I take everything, right, personally in my business is. I mean, just like when I was in cars, I hated cars. I don't care about cars. Like, you give a crap less what engine, like, does it get you A to B? And honestly, and like coming from construction, also, like, I kind of feel the same way about houses. I mean, like, I really don't care about houses. Like, I know them and know the details, and I like pointing out the flaws and everything else. But my business is very based on that. And like, if whether it's a listing appointment, buyer consultation, anything, and like, I only talk about real estate 5 to 10% of the time. The other 90% is make a friend. And that's all I ever want to do is genuinely make a friend. And the house stuff, it's like, you already know I'm an agent. The house stuff is going to come up no matter what. So who cares? And like, I want to know like the details and the kids and the sports and the things and where you're going and like life, and tell me your stories of where you've been. And people love to talk about themselves, but that makes it so much easier. But like I had, so it's not buyer, but like I had a listing appointment yesterday. It was 3.5 hours long. Hey, the guy gave me a tour of his house. We became good friends. He told me all about his life and everything else. And like, even on the tour, like, when we just told stories and talked about our families and our lives and our worlds. And then in the last 20 minutes, we sat down at the kitchen table and signed paperwork.
Yeah, I was curious. So as you guys are going through this process, a lot of you have different approaches to how you engage with clients early on. Do you do some type of a needs analysis? And also talk to me about how you interface with lenders if the person isn't purchasing cash. But I'm curious for you guys, Jordan, maybe we'll start with you. How do you deal with that, like needs assessment, pre-qualification? How are you interfacing with the lender, et cetera, before you make an offer?
Yes. So I will say I have, I love it when they want lender recommendations, because I have 4 different lenders that I work with. Each one has a different personality, guys, girls, ages, like very diverse. And so that way I know who to match them up with. I know all 4 will have my back and validate everything that I'm saying. And I'm just very connected with them. And so of course, sometimes they come with their own lender, which is totally fine. So I work immediately on building a relationship with that lender, and we work together to get them pre-approved. I'm nudging them on my side, all of that. So, lender relationship is very important, and also having each other's backs. And so I just, in that buyer consultation, we just cover as much as possible for the needs analysis. And setting expectations, coming up with a game plan, checking in with them on how they're doing, feeling, thinking, all the, like, if they're like hot and like about to offer, like every day for sure. I would say those are just kind of the top things that I do, and it works really well.
That's awesome. Josh, what about you? Hold on one second. Let's get you unmuted there, boss.
I ask questions and listen. I think as realtors, a lot of us like to hear ourselves talk more than we should. And so you have to be able to ask a question. What are you looking for? Like, here's what I always say. I said, hey, if you could have anything you want, if you could have elk in your front yard and salmon swimming down the river that runs through your front yard and the Cascade Mountains in your backyard, tell me exactly what you want, right? So give them everything they want. And then you have to have the realistic conversation with them, right? If we can check 70% of those boxes, that's probably your house, because 100% very rarely happens. And then the lender conversation, I actually work almost exclusively with one lender, and I choose this gentleman because he is over the top communicative. Like every single week I get updates. He updates the listing agent every single week on my offers. And I think that is a part of why our buyers love us so much. We've never not got a 5-star review, because they know every step of the way from start to finish. And they know exactly what to expect. And you never have to wonder what's going on, because I'm sure everyone's worked with that lender that doesn't say anything, right, until the last day. Hey, I need an extension because I can't close this, right? That's just terrible, right? And that's a terrible experience for a buyer, especially maybe a first-time home buyer, which has never done this, and they're all excited about moving to their house, and then they get that dreaded phone call, right? So communication up front, I think is paramount. Asking them what they want, listening to what they want, and this isn't about you. Take you out of the equation. This is about your client.
That's awesome. And Natasha, what about you? In terms of this pre-offer stage, do you do a needs assessment, and do you work with a specific lender? Do you, obviously, by the way, for those of you who don't know, when you're making recommendations, most states have a requirement that you not be steering the business, so you have to make several recommendations. However, a lot of times some of your business is coming from a specific lender. Maybe you have an established relationship where you're prospecting together. But Natasha, how are you dealing with that needs assessment and that kind of pre-offer stage?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was just going to add, actually, is that I make sure to give multiple lender referrals, even if it's only two, for that like liability of it. Because I have had a situation in the past where, it went downhill, and then all of a sudden it was my guy that they were working with. And I feel like just almost always giving people an option in the beginning kind of can take that pressure off. And of course, it was a learning experience for me in that moment too. And usually the hardest ones are the best ones, I suppose. But starting off again, yeah, dream house is how I like to start. I like to get people excited about what it is that they're getting into, and spark imagination and creativity and all of those things, and then work our way back from that onto the realistic conversation. I think keeping the whole process fun is really the direction I like to go, as fun as it can be.
I love that. It provides a lot of clarity for the client too, though, if you can make it fun and educational at the same time. Because if your client feels lost all the time, yes, it creates dependence, but it also creates blame, right? Something goes wrong and they're fully dependent on you. You haven't given them options and the ability to have clarity and focus. Then what ends up happening is if something goes wrong, and now it's your fault.
So what to the same question, and like I'll do my own like buyer analysis and everything else, but really like my analysis is one to like make them see what I see and to understand like where I'm coming from when I bring things to the table. So like one of my big things is like I'll pop MLS, plug my HDMI cord into the big TV, and so that they can see it. And because like one, you need to ask better questions. And this is where like my eye comes in on the disc profiles, because like I've had agents in the past, so it's like if somebody tells you they want a big backyard, what do you say? They're like, well, what's a big backyard mean to you, Mr. Joe Schmo? And it's like, no, dude. It's like if you tell me like, I want a big backyard, I'm like, oh, awesome. Do you got kids? And you're like, big dogs? I want personal. So asking questions that are going to get them further to talk about themselves. But like the MLS side, everybody wants like the whole hoop de gras, the kit and caboodle, everything. But really being able to show people, here are all your credentials. And look, we have 7 houses to look at. Figuring out what they're willing to sacrifice and figuring out what they're not willing to sacrifice. Because then you can turn it as like, so I know you just had a couple of kids and da da da. But like simply put, I mean, like in our price range, 4-bedroom houses, there's 4 out there. But if we do switch it to a 3-bedroom, check it out. But making sure to guide them correctly on those steps, so that they're doing the right things, so that you're only investing in the things that are actually going to have an ROI.
I love this. Well, and what's interesting is there's some similarities between how all of these top producers handle this type of a process, this pre-offer stage with a buyer. And then there's some differences, right? Some of you guys are like, I do it this way or I do it that way. There's these micro differences. And what I've noticed with a lot of top producers, having interviewed a ton of people who do incredible amounts of business, just like you guys, is there's always some micro variances. And then there's some really key similarities of stuff where it's like, I control my time. I make sure that I'm controlling the sale. Tyler, I saw that you had a slide in there about kind of this controlling the sale, this part of the process, which is really important. So I'm going to pull up a slide really quick. There we go. And over here, we've got a little bit of a breakdown. And for those of you who are maybe newer to this, wanted to make sure that you guys were able to see a full kind of breakdown of what a transaction looks like. What is the pre-offer stage? We just talked about that. And then this idea of making an offer. So let's get to that. Now we're making an offer. This is the kind of, it feels like it should be exciting. Recently, maybe it's been a little less exciting. But making an offer with the client is exciting for them. Let's talk about that. And I'd like to know from each of you guys, as you're doing your offer prep, are you running comps? Are you preparing a comparable analysis of this property to other recent sales, other properties that are on the market? Are you using market knowledge? What are you using there? How do you explain things like an earnest money deposit or the negotiation, the acceptance of the offer, et cetera, to these clients so that they have clarity in terms of your process and what's going to be expected of them? How are you controlling that part of the sale very specifically?
So I made my own home buyer roadmap, one that just makes sense for me and the way I communicate. So I have a nice brochure. I bring it with me, and sometimes I'll send it. And if we're doing a Zoom consultation, I'll email it to them first. But anyway, so I bring it to them, and then I just make it very clear that I'm going to give them, this is an overview. I really don't want their eyes glazing over during this appointment at all. but I make sure they know, like, when we're hitting each stage of the transaction, that I will be sitting down with them or having a call. I will be going into depth about all the different scenarios, but I tell them there's not really much of a point going over, like, getting in the weeds on these, because every transaction is like a snowflake. No two are the same. So we'd be sitting here for 5 hours talking about it. And so I just make sure they know I have the knowledge and the expertise. I'm going to be in it with you, linking arms with you through this whole transaction. And so you're going to be educated and empowered along the way. And so then I proceed to go through the roadmap, making sure they understand the overview and the concepts there. And then I make it very, talk about the lender portion, all the different parties in the transaction, and also what money do they need in their pocket upfront, so there's no surprises after they get their offer accepted. And it's like, hey, now you got your earnest money, and schedule the inspection. And they're like, well, I don't have thousands of dollars for this. So that will never happen. And I want them leaving the appointment, like I said, like trusting me and just like super excited about it.
I love that. And I want to hand it to Josh because I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I talk to them like they've never done this before, because a lot of them have never done this before. So I make sure they understand the process. They don't know what escrow is. They don't know what earnest money is. They don't know that, oh, I have to pay for these 3 inspections. Oh, those are non-refundable fees. So be very clear with your clients on what is expected, right? Like, do you do a radon test? What the hell is radon, right? Like, explain these things to people, because, at the point where you don't tell somebody something is the point where you're going to get in trouble for not telling somebody something. Or you're going to have to end up buying it yourself. But my general process is I sit down with them, right? I absolutely do comps on properties, right? I look for properties that have been on the market for 30 to 45 days. That is my target, because that's the one I know I'm going to be able to get a deal on. If it's been on the market for 30 to 45 days, you're going to be able to ask easily for 3 to 6% off and usually get it. So that's first one, right? Run comps on the property, be realistic with them, tell them what you expect. I tell all my sellers, if we get an offer within 3 to 6% of what we're asking, it's a pretty good offer. That's something you should consider. So I tell my buyers that same thing. Hey, can I ask for $200,000 off? No, you cannot. However, you can ask for 3 to 6%, and that's generally pretty good, right? But what does that price look like, right? Do you want concessions, or do you want a straight up price? Because oftentimes concessions make make a better deal for you in the monthly payment, which is what everybody is encouraging. Like, I want a better payment, right? Give me $50,000 off. I'd rather have a $20,000 credit than $50,000 off, because a $20,000 credit is going to make more difference to me, who lives from paycheck to paycheck and is wanting to buy a house at what the rates are, right? So definitely do your comps. During COVID, we didn't do comps. You just asked the question, hey, can you afford $200,000 more than this house is listed at? If the answer is yes, then that's what you write it at. Those times are gone, right? So now you actually have to look at what the house is worth, what it's sold for, what the comparables will sort for, and tell your clients what you're doing, right? Like, hey, these are comparables and these are why they're comparables. I think a lot of people get caught up in this industry. Hey, I've done this for a long time. I can tell you what escrow is. I can tell you what a comp is. Your clients don't know that, because they have lives that are outside buying and selling houses, right? So be very clear with what you're telling people and explain everything. And if you do that, you're not only going to have a happy client, but you're going to have a buyer for life. You're going to have a friend. You're going to have a neighbor, and somebody that's going to be a raving fan. You don't just want clients, you want raving fans. So when somebody says, I'm buying a house, who should I talk to? Oh, you got to talk to Jordan Hill. She is awesome. She's all over social media and she does everything, right? That's the difference between you getting a referral and you not getting a referral.
I love that. And so Natasha.
Yeah, I like to work kind of from the written to verbal on this one, just to kind of give people the time to digest the information first and then sit over Zoom and go over it. So early on, when I realized, my first time I had 3 transactions at a time, or, more than what felt like I could handle, I was like, oh, I need templates for all of this that I can easily plug and play numbers into, and I don't have to write out every single time what earnest money is. And so having that template that I send off to them, and of course I put their comps in it, I put their numbers in it, I apply it to them before sending it. But letting them discuss without me for a minute, and if it's a couple or a family or whatever, And then jumping on the Zoom call and going over bullet by bullet all the things we need to put into that contract so that they're not making decisions in a conversation on the spot. They felt like they've already spent some time. They've thought about it. They have questions for me that they're coming to and being like, we have no idea what this looks like. Remind us. I know we talked about it in the buyer's consultation, but those I feel like take the pressure off in an already stressful situation. So without my templates, I would be a mess.
Yeah.
So would they.
Yeah. No, and I agree to it. I mean, there's so much involved with just preparation. And it's just preparing their brains for every step of the way, right? And just having that open line of communication. Because on my end, like to touch on what Jordan said a little bit, and like in my world, part of like pre-offer everything, whether it's like the consultation, right, all the way to the offer piece, it could be like the fourth or fifth house we look at. I'm always waiting for the moment, for the psychological turn where I can start saying we and us, right? Because then creating that team atmosphere psychologically for when it comes time to writing an offer, like we're writing the offer, right? I think we should offer this and we should be doing it, and it like creating that kind of team atmosphere to it. And I always run comps, of course, because I've had situations where I'm like, dude, you're $50,000 higher than me. Where the hell's the pool? Right? Like, why is this happening? Right? And also because if I can get a leg up on a listing agent, right, like, fantastic. Right? But like that process of like just making them feel more knowledgeable, right? Because I also just kind of like prep people in the same sense of, is like, hey, like once we go into this process, like please remember, just as I said before, the only stupid question is the question you don't ask.
I love it. And you know what's amazing in all of this? Again, same situation where we heard a lot of similarities and then some key differences between how everyone's handling this. Okay, so I want to keep moving through a transaction. And here's what's interesting. So now we've made an offer, right? Offers are free. Love it. We've gone through the offer prep. Some people are running comps. Some people are running maybe a big market comp. Some people, I like Josh, by the way, the strategy of kind of looking out on the market to see where maybe there's a discount rate that's hidden where I could take advantage of that on behalf of my client. Remember, we are a fiduciary on behalf of our client, which means we're actually trying to act in their best interest, not our own, right? You don't want to have commission breath. It's not about you. You got to make it about them. So let's bring it back to this. So now you're under contract. What's the next thing that happens? Generally speaking, we're going to talk about inspections. Okay. I'm interested because everybody deals with this one differently. How are we dealing with getting inspections done, getting appraisals ordered, by the way, then doing the repair addendum? How do you guys approach that, right? How do you prevent this from blowing up your deal? Because we all know that this is a huge moment where it's like a stick of dynamite. And then also, how are you ensuring that those repairs actually get facilitated within an appropriate timeline?
Yes. So before, kind of in the same like 24 hours as scheduling the inspections, we have essentially like a huddle before a game. And we just get them really positive about this. We actually show them two different inspections that with permission to show. Well, one of them is Mike's in my house, actually. Because we want to say like, hey, like we're agents. This is the house we live in. It was built in the 70s. Look at this report. This is normal. This is great. This home is considered in actually pretty good condition. And we just really set expectations and we make sure that they know that no matter what happens, 9 times out of 10, there is a solution. There's a win-win for everybody, and just to trust us through this. And when they get that report, they know what they're going to see. And then they're like already ready to like look for solutions with us. So that's you, just setting expectations. We attend the inspection and either Zoom them in if they're like out of state or encourage them to come. And we make sure that we're the translator for the inspector who might say, this is all rotted out and this is horrible and this needs done. And we then say, hey, like, what does that mean? You know, how is this home compared to other homes that are 1994, you know, and oh, well, actually this house is in great condition. It's awesome, you know, so we have to make sure that their language isn't scary to our people. And so Relationship with the other agent, of course, comes into play. We should have a good, sometimes the agent on the other side doesn't allow this to happen, but if they do, we should have a really good relationship with them and know about their sellers and like what their situation is. And that way really both agents are working as a team for a win-win. And I guess the other thing is that I'll say is having a really good network, like of contractors, plumbers, people you can text photos to, people you can come out and get a bid during the inspection period if needed. It's a whole lead gen strategy to have that, list of people too. But as far as the inspection period, really, really important because they're at your fingertips to help you come up with that solution like within hours, potentially.
I love that. Hey, I'm curious on this one for like inspections and repairs and all that fun stuff. Your take, Natasha.
Yeah, I think, even going through and showing houses, I feel like is when I start to introduce some of the things, that could be happening during the inspection period. So it's like every stage of dealing, with your new client, I feel like interjecting these moments that are preparing them for things that can be challenging later on and downplaying them from the start. Not to say you're giving them bad advice by any means. I think there's plenty of houses or situations where you're like, nah, this is not your house. But I do think it's important to decatastrophize everything from the start, especially with certain clients. So that, starts my process with that. And then again, right after I have an offer accepted, I send out another email that's like, okay, and these are all these steps, and very, clearly defining, giving multiple options for inspectors that I do have strong relationships with, so I could trust that they're not going to be like, the floor is rotting out, and you're like, really? Or is that just they need some LVP? I don't know. So having those relationships is important. Being able to call on a roofer that, isn't the guy that can, constantly tells you need a new roof. Because there's definitely those contractors out there that you're like, wow, this person said it was just a small repair and you're telling us we need a whole new roof. But again, liability wise, I always like to make sure that my clients have options that they're choosing from out of a list I provide them. And I think that that's kind of put out a lot of fires before they start.
Yeah, I love the decatastrophize. I know Jeff put it in the chat, but I love that. All right, Josh, what about you?
I use one of two inspectors. I have two that I like to go to. Both of them actually know how to talk to people. I think that's very important, right? The inspector that walks around with his phone like this, typing stuff into it as he goes, is the terrible inspector. So if you guys have any of that, fire them and get an old crusty guy that writes stuff down, right? You want an old crusty guy that has experience in actual building, right? Like being a home inspector is not difficult. Like most people can get their license to be a home inspector, but unless you have a background in the actual trades, construction, electrical, plumbing, stuff like that, like you're gonna have a hard time being a long-lasting home inspector. So that's number one. Number two is I attend every single inspection. 100% I'm there because I want to be there for my clients on their behalf, right? I deal with a lot of people that don't live here yet, and they trust me to go there and talk about the things. I'm a very technical salesperson, so I've made it my business to understand the thing. I'm not a construction contractor. I don't have a CCV, but I know a lot about how houses are built, right? So I can equate this to something my client understands. I think that goes back to like, we do this all the time. So use your knowledge of how houses are built and what you've seen to explain to your customer, hey, this is the real problem, right? I don't ever encourage anybody to not have an inspection. Like I encourage them to have all the inspections, right? I offer a radon, a sewer scope, a mold if mold is discovered in the original inspection, and a whole house home inspection, right? Like I don't think there's too many inspections. Just know that all these cost money and they're all non-refundable, but it's the cheapest insurance you'll ever buy, right? And then I sit and I go line by line through the 40-page inspection report. Every single item I talk to them on, I tell them this would be my concern, and these are the things I would ask for, right? These are the most important items. and know that any roofer, any electrician, any plumber, they are all trying to sell a service, right? They want a new roof. They want to replace your water lines. They want to that because that's what they do. However, a home inspector is required by law not to sell anything. They can't actually. It's in their bylaws. They can't actually sell anything. So a good home inspector and like make that relationship with that guy or that gal, right? And keep it and keep sending them business, because the more business you send them, the better job they're going to do. They'll fit you into spots, and all that kind of stuff. And a good home inspection with somebody that's respected in your community can be the difference, because as a listing agent also, I know which inspectors are not good and I know which inspectors are good.
Yeah, and I run a lot of the same. So like what Jordan said, I use my inspection as an example, because I get to say like this is a really good one, right? But I prep people forward on like you're gonna get this thing. It's gonna be 60 to 80 pages long. It's gonna be extremely overwhelming, but like really displaying the difference between like there's cosmetic and there's structural. We are hoping for structural and making both sides of it good. Is like if it's a clean inspection, hell yeah. And then be like, but if there's something structurally wrong, whew, bullets in the gun, baby. Like we're gonna take some cake and eat it too. And don't be scared that it says like seek a qualified professional for like chipped paint. Every single thing is seek a qualified professional, because the professional we're hiring is just a professional inspector.
I love it. So we've kind of covered the inspection process, which is awesome. And each of you actually handle this fairly similarly. That was kind of great news, I think, for everybody, which is you're setting the stage early on, you're contextualizing. This is an education process for the client. People do get freaked out, right? So if you start to set the stage for people to understand what to expect, then they don't get freaked out. I'm curious really quick, and I want to do 30 seconds each because I'm keeping an eye on time. So repairs versus credits. Okay, so repairs, asking for repairs from the listing agent and the seller, versus asking for a credit. Where do you draw the line? How do you advise your client on where they should maybe land? Jordan.
It's hard because it really depends on them, their level of anxiety. Some clients would rather back out than have to coordinate repairs, but just getting bids, having things in writing, everything in writing, every detail between the buyer and seller, just minimizing their risk as much as possible. But yeah, I would say just having getting good bids throughout. That'll be key there, so they feel at ease if it is a credit at close.
I love that. So really just aligning with your client. That's awesome. Josh.
It depends on what kind of credit I got in the initial offer.
Right.
Because obviously you can only use so much credit. But I think I'm with Jordan on this. Like, it depends on what your client wants. I have a list that's very long of tradesmen that can do anything and everything, from a handyman to a roofer, right? Like, I have everybody. So I also look at my client's financial situation, where are they at, right? Can they afford a new roof, right? Does that make sense to ask for that now? So what your client wants, where they're most comfortable at, and the discounts that you've negotiated before the deal.
I love that, and also if it's required for the loan is something that Christine just put in the chat. Natasha, what about you?
Yep, same, mortgage based, client based, stress level based, time of the transaction. I'm like, can we get someone to come do this? And then also telling the client the options between, do you want to pick your contractors, or do you trust the seller to pick the contractor? Most of the time, I feel like when you explain it that way, they're like, oh, I kind of want to do that. Even if they are stressed about doing the repair, they want the control of like, I want it to be good though.
Well, and timing, that was such a critical point. And I love that you pointed that out. I didn't think to mention that, but it totally makes sense, right? Like, we don't have time to put a new roof on this, 5,000 square foot, one-story house. We're going to have to deal with that differently or whatever. That's awesome. Tyler.
Personally, I mean, like, yes, it's based on client. But I prefer credits, like, all the way. Get a bid in there, get somebody like good to actually throw a number on it, like get a credit, because I view everything very like it's either structural or cosmetic. If it's structural, that can be a little bit different of a conversation. Like back in January, in lieu of like, I'll never call you with a problem without two solutions, I called the client and she was like, I want to back out, I'm so sad, and like, there's so many problems. And I was like, oh, I already got a roof bid. It's actually $8,700, and my guy owed me a favor, and I was just going to make them pay for that. Is that, and like have it done before it closes? Does that sound good? It depends on the situation for sure. I always prefer the credit over anything else. And like I said, it's always cosmetic and structural to me, and that's just my construction background talking.
Okay, so so that's awesome. And at this point in the process, by the way, two things I want to understand on appraisals. And for those of you who are newer to the game of real estate, appraisals are this awesome moment when a person whose job it is to ensure that the risk that the lender is taking on is appropriate based on the property, right? They're collateralizing a loan. They're going to sell this loan on the secondary mortgage market. They have to be sure it's actually saleable. And all of this underwriting is going to happen a second time when it gets sold and packaged. And so we need to make sure that this is an appropriate property for the amount of money that's being lent. So the appraiser comes in, they send back a number, it either meets or doesn't meet appraisal. I'm curious how each of you sets the stage for appraisals. Do you talk about this early in the process? How early do you order your appraisal? And then also if it comes in high, woohoo, if it comes in low, how are you dealing with that with your clients? What's that conversation look like? So Jordan, let's jump in with you first. So just appraisals as a topic here. How are you dealing with that and massaging that with your clients?
Yeah, so we touch on it during the home buyer consultation, but again, like this is another step where we kind of have a huddle beforehand. It's not as lengthy as the inspection one typically, but we give kind of worst, best, and the most probable outcomes and make sure that they know that this is one of those things that is not really completely in our control. We're at the mercy of the appraiser. So I will say though that my conversation with the other agent would have started before writing the offer. Some agents aren't communicative, so I'm not talking about those ones, but most of them are. And we've already talked about what happens if it appraises low. Because sometimes if that's something we won't be able to come to terms with, if it gets there, then offering on it is pretty risky. So we've already kind of like figured out all the different scenarios by the time that happens. And usually if we've ran our CMA, like Josh said, we've done that when we wrote the offer, like, hopefully it comes in at value. That's usually what will happen, but we'll know exactly who's going to be covering the appraisal gap if it comes in low.
I love that. Do you set an expectation early on for that part of the like who's going to cover the appraisal gap with your client? Do you discuss that as well?
Yeah. So I do with the other agent first, if possible, and then bring it to my client if we know that the seller is like they need to net a certain amount and that can't happen. Yesterday, one of my team members went into it with the seller agreeing to pay $7,000 in the appraisal gap should it come to it. So really, you just find out who's got what and who's willing to do what to make it work if it appraises low.
Nice. And do you sorry for so many questions. I love this though. Do you substantiate property value with the appraiser when they come? Like, do you provide your comps?
I've only done it like 2 or 3 times if I really think that it's gonna be
we got to make sure, right?
Yeah, so I will leave like something in the home, like leave like my CMA in the home. But I also want to make sure I do it in a way that doesn't piss off the inspector. So
yeah, you can't tell them how to do their job, but just hey, this is what I use, just so you know.
It's more like, hey, I hope this helps. Use it or not. Appreciate you so much. Have a great day. Like
sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Awesome. Josh?
Yeah, so I set the appraisal expectation right on the bat, right? I always run comps. I'm pretty confident that my comps are going to come in at what the appraiser thinks. I've been in this area for a long time. I don't know, it's been a long time since I came up against an appraisal thing. Probably COVID when we were offering $200,000 more than what something was worth. But I always have appraisal done after the inspection comes back, right? Unless we're on a super, super tight timeline, because if you don't know this, your appraisal is going to cost your buyer out-of-pocket dollars, right? So that's important to know, because if they get a inspection and they back out and the appraisal has already been done, guess what? It just cost them $800 and they don't get that money back either. So make sure you're telling your people that. My lenders always order the appraisal. I've never ordered one myself. I don't know if that's something that anyone else does, but the lender always takes care of that. And have I gone back to...
What about the timing of that, though, Josh? Do you coordinate? I know that you said you have one lender where you guys tend to collaborate a lot.
Yeah.
Some people I know are ordering it like the second we go under contract. Sometimes though, you don't want your like appraisal to happen before your inspections, because now you're just costing your buyer money. Like, how are you navigating that?
Yeah, I never ever have it ordered before we get out of the inspection period, right? So we schedule our inspection. We're usually in inspections within 2 to 3 days of the signed agreement, right? We're getting the inspection done, so then we can move on to the negotiation and finally the appraisal.
Smart.
I have gone to appraisal people and said, why did you give this? In fact, I did it on my own personal property, and so I think that that's a valuable tool, right? Like, I think I actually probably know the area as well. Because if you don't know, appraisals come out of a bucket. They don't necessarily live in your territory or anything, right? Like, it gets thrown into this massive bucket. They pull them out, and you could get somebody, if you live in Bend, Oregon, you may get an appraiser that lives in Culver, Oregon. Culver, Oregon is drastically different than Bend, Oregon, right? And so sometimes you do have to guide people. And I've had it play both ways. I've had them say, nope, that's what it is. And I've had people say, no, you're right. And these are the comps we should use.
Love that.
That's awesome. All right, Natasha, what about you?
Yeah, I think the only thing I want to add is, what I like to remind my clients is that it's an opinion of a single person, just in case anything crazy does come up. But keeping an eye out again. Sometimes I've had inspectors that miss, chip paint on a FHA appraisal on the back of a detached garage, and then all of a sudden you're having a re-inspect and your client's paying for it. So, training yourself what the appraisers are looking for, especially for those other mortgages that require more, working with veterans a lot, or, whatever that is. So I think that it's good to kind of, obviously you're not an appraiser, but you should know what the appraisers are looking for.
Yeah, and to that, like those two huge pieces, like I will like verbalize to like a listing agent, like my goal is always to just get it signed. The moment it's signed, you're locked in. I've got the buyer, you've got the seller, and I immediately will be like, hey, there's only one water heater strap. Hey, the garage door doesn't like self-close. And can you guys address that and make sure that's done just along with like CO2 detectors and all the fun stuff, and just before the appraiser goes. Appraiser always after inspector, but also like the moment I have somebody locked in and it's like, listing agent, you're so cool, like I love you, oh, you're the best. Can you do me a favor and have your sellers write down an itemized list of all the upgrades that they've done since 2017 when they bought, and send it to me? Because then it's just on hand. And the moment I need it, just, oh, here you go. This is what they did. This is what they did. And so when an appraiser hits me up, I send it right out. Because then they're already walking into a justified position, thinking about the psychology with the appraiser's mind.
I love that. Well, and what you hear is, and hopefully everyone who's watching this, whether it's now or later, is hearing the one thing that I heard that was consistent through everyone is, I'm setting the stage for this conversation early on. You don't want people being freaked out. This is like super late in what's going on? What do you mean appraisal? And I love, Jordan, you said best case and worst case. Absolutely. Help them to understand it. In the worst case, here's what we'll do, and it'll be fine. In the best case, here's what we'll do, and that we'll high five, and that'll be great. But either way, you're going to be okay, and we've planned for this, so you have options. Okay, so we've got a few minutes left. Let's go through the closing process. And I have a couple questions. One, do you show up at closing? Right? This is a hotly debated topic. There's no right or wrong answers. Everyone does this differently. Like, do you go to the title company and watch them sign docs? And then post-closing, also before that, how are you coordinating with your lender to make sure that everything is in place? You're not doing their job for them, but do you communicate? What's your closing process, whether it's on your team or for you personally? And we'll go around the circle again. So Jordan, why don't you jump in first on this one?
Yes. So I'm checking through it the whole transaction, but about a week before, I'm really checking in with the lender. I'm really making sure my client's good. I just because it's kind of that smooth sailing period doesn't mean I don't talk to them. So I'm checking in with the lender and just keeping everyone, making sure those closing docs are looking good. Checking in with title, like, let me know when you schedule with them, blah, blah, blah. I do show up to showing. I do show up to closing unless I'm like gone out of state or something. And then I send a team member. But yeah, and then I always plan a gift. So I actually closed on something yesterday and bought them Don Julio 1942 and something I found at the farmer's market that I thought they'd like. So I bring them a closing gift and take pictures. and just make a big deal out of giving them their keys. But yeah, I definitely do like touch base with all parties like daily for that last week.
Nice. And do you also then, do you do anything immediately post closing? I know some people kind of stop by. Do you ever do that? Is that something that's maybe later in your process?
Oh yeah, like basically just like nurturing them in the future. So we drop off the keys. If they're doing like a housewarming party, we always go to that. But after that, we pretty much invite to client events. I always do like quarterly like client events and just bringing them in, treat them like family, all of that for like ever.
I love it. All right, Natasha, what about you? Let's go opposite order on the circle here.
Yeah, again checking in with escrow and lenders definitely through the whole transaction, but definitely closer to the first, up to the week before close. I don't typically go to the actual escrow office, mainly because the majority of the time I can't give them keys until 5 o'clock anyways. So I like to do a walkthrough of the house at some point within a couple days before closing. And then I do my pictures. I do my little gift at the house when I'm able to drop off keys. We have a moment, and then I check in another week or so later to see how their move has been. Yeah, that's my process.
I love it. I love it. Josh.
I go to every closing. I have for 22 years. I think it's an important piece of it. It's kind of your ability to like say, hey, like Tyler said earlier, like we're a team, right? Like what part of a team doesn't show up for every part of the event? So I think that that's
Awesome.
very important. And about a week prior to it, I'm making phone calls to make sure Utility Connect, if you guys don't use it, is great. Like it just reminds them, hey, I've got to buy power for this place, that kind of stuff, right? Because people forget, right? Like I said, we do this every day. I think my lender told me I'm averaging a transaction every 14 days, right? The average person averages a home every, like 3 to 4, maybe in their whole lifetime, right? So those things, signing up for home insurance and getting your electricity and water turned on, those are all very important things. And then I also do a video in the title office for my social pages, my YouTube channel, as well as all the other socials on closing with all my buyers. So I think all that together creates a good experience for them.
I love that. And I just posted the link to Utility Connect in case anyone isn't familiar with that. That's we actually have a JV or an affiliated partnership with them through EXP. So definitely use that product. That's awesome. And Tyler, what about you?
I am actually the opposite. I do not go to signings. And I prep my people for that. I get them super hyped up for the 5 o'clock key drop, and like what that looks like, and I prep them for the whole process, and I say it simply like, this is the day that you're going to go and sign. Like they're going to do the thing, and after that, like let's bubble up. Like I'll meet people afterward for like lunch or like occasionally and stuff like that. But I do not go to signings. That's not my forte. I feel like I can be doing income producing activities, and hence the debate. But everything afterward, by that point, and my goal is always to make sure like that they know that they like got a house but got a friend. And like we're friends on all social media, everything. Like I'm involved in their family life at that point, because I genuinely want that. And because I'll kind of leave it with this is like buyers to me for like what comes afterward is like, yesterday I went on a 3.5 hour listing appointment where I'm just trying to make a friend. But really, in my brain, it's kind of like future pacing. Like with any buyer, is like, if I can go make a friend and get a listing signed in 2 hours, like you're telling me I can hang out with somebody for 30 to 45 days? Like that's the longest listing appointment in the world. And I am like, we are going to hang out.
I love it. Well, so, and by the way, it doesn't have to be a debate. And by the way, Josh, I agree with you. And Tyler, I agree with you. It doesn't matter. I've probably coached north of 2,000 agents at this point, and a lot of top producers, and many top producers go to closing. Every single one they have for 20 years, like Josh. Many of them say, I'll never go to a closing. I think it's a waste of my time. Who cares? The right answer is whatever's right for you and being consistent. And also having a consistent customer service experience that brings your clients back to you. If you're not going to closings and they're not coming back to you, maybe you're missing an opportunity, right? But if you aren't going to closings and you're doing 200 deals a year and life is good, then freaking rock and roll, man. Like clearly what you're doing is working. That's awesome. You have a different process and a different approach. And so it's really about what works, not about, your emotions or how you feel about it. And if it's producing results and it's great for the client, they feel comfortable, then that's awesome. And by the way, Jordan, Josh, Natasha, Tyler, you guys are awesome. Thank you so much for spending this time today, walking us through your process as it pertains to buyers. You guys are really, truly incredible. And for people who don't know, every single person on this panel today is a mega top producer. These people are top 1%. Absolutely love you being willing to give of your time. And this is something I've noticed, by the way. People at the top collaborate, they don't compete. If you notice yourself in competition mode all the time with everybody, it's because you're not at the top yet. That's an interesting thing. If you're like, I compete with everybody. Okay, well, you won't when you're at the top. What you'll start doing is collaborating and sharing and helping other people to win, because there's enough success for all of us. So thank you guys from the bottom of my heart, from the bottom of the community's heart. Thank you guys for being here, for being willing to give your time. Go eXp Realty, best brokerage on earth. Thank you guys again. Appreciate you here, and we'll talk to everyone soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.